Okay, hello everybody. We are from Group 3, and today we'd like to discuss about the evaluation and selection of news. This group consists of Ika Anggitaningrum, Ulfatun Maghfiroh, Novita Devi K, and Wahyu Hadinoto. And for the first, the evaluation and selection of news will be delivered by Ika Anggitaningrum.
Okay, thank you, the moderator. The first thing that I would like to explain is about the evaluation and selection of news. Why we should do evaluation and selection in news? A news has its news values before published. News value are criteria that influence the selection and evaluation of event as public news. News values are not universal and can vary between different cultures. Among the many lists of news values that have been drawn up by scholars and journalists, some attempt to describe news practice across cultures, while others have become remarkably specific to the press of certain nations. And the next point is about characteristic of news. There are 6 major characteristics of news. The first one is timeliness. If it happened today rather than yesterday, it just might be news. It means journalists stress current information, stories occurring today or yesterday, not several weeks. And second, impact. If it affected readers psychically or emotionally, it just might be news. It means reporters stress important information that has an impact on their audience. Stories that affect, involve, or interest thousands of readers or viewers. Number 3, prominence. If it happened to a recognizable person, it just might be news. It means if a plumber catches a cold, no one cares except that person, friends, or family. Number 4, proximity. If it happened in a place that readers feel a connection to some place that feel allied with, rather than some faraway place, it just might be news. Number 5, singularity. If something has never happened before, it just might be news. Deviation from the normal, unexpected, or unusual event, conflict, or controversy, or drama. It is for the example. And the last is about conflict. Conflict means if somebody is struggling with problem, it just might be news. The tension between its subject creates the conflict that often make a story dramatic and interesting to read. While conflict between groups can be viewed as negative news, it often provides readers and viewers that different opinion about policies and problems. The next one about evaluating news of significance.
The distance between the news audience and the news event influences news selection in many ways. Newsmen recognize that the geographical factor is not a consistent but varies in all media and all areas, and from one decade to the next. As the area increases and the size of the audience grows, and the character and interests of the audience changes, the news that is selected must reflect these changes. The relative significance of news may be determined by the proportion of people in community whose lives are affected by the news event. In addition, the size of the community and degree of competition for news attention also affect news selection. News with strong claims to public attention because its significance for relatively large number of people usually called by newsmen as hard news. Hard news is the news of government activity, politics, economics, international relations, education, religion, legislature, court, and most public news. This kind of news is not always easy to understand, and it often makes difficult in reading. Hard news often gets smaller audience through such news is usually by definition a far more important than soft news that attract readers in droves. And the next part is about evaluating news of interest. In order to select news of interest, the newsman must know what people want out of news, that why they prefer one kind of news. One generalization can safely be offered to all audience, whether it's men, women, children, who give close attention to news only when they can expect to get something out of it. They pay attention to news when it promises to fulfill some need or desire, whether recognized or lying below the horizon of their awareness. But if he is an average reader, he spent a good share of his total reading time of 45 minutes on other types of news that entertain him. The next point is selecting stories with human interests. A story that's strong in human is a story that gives reader an immediate feeling of personal involvement in new situation. It amuses reader, excite or depressed him, stimulate his sympathy or his sexual appetite, and sadness or angered him, or appeals to his self-interest in a way he can feel that he is a vigorous participant instead of outside observer. It also requires less concentration. For example, a news of a 17 years old boy who go out of jail to do an exam. Yeah. Understanding response to human interest stories. Newsmen select and use human interest stories of all these types because they know that most people find emotional news to which they have personal reaction more interesting and entertaining than hard news which has no obvious relation to him.
And the next slide is about the fair reading responses to news. Dr. Wilbur's grant. Immediate rewards. It gives an instant impulse like love, feels sympathy, tingles with excitement. News categories: crime and corruption, accident and disaster, sport and recreation, and social event. Delayed rewards. It's news that doesn't affect the consumer instantly. The full impact comes later. News categories: public affairs, economic matters, social problems, science, education, weather, and health. And the next slide is about the character of news. A thoughtful man, newsman, or consumer may make his own analysis of these terms and ideas to see how they can apply to his own and other people's news interests. A man is more interested in events or concepts that affect his well-being or well-advancement. The factor of geographical proximity in news makes story more interesting to the consumer. News of event places, people, or facts that a consumer already knows of are always more interesting than news that is entirely strange. News interest. Time is an element that is always considered in the evaluation and selection of news of importance and news of interest. The test of news was not as newsness, but whether or not the reported events related to the reader's lives. The more recent the event, the hotter the news that reports it. Qualities, timeliness, and seasonableness make news valid to their audience even when the news are not current.
Okay, now I would like to give more explanation about timelines and also seasonables. Okay, the first is timelines. A story is timely if it is appropriate to the audience at the time when it is printed or broadcast, whether the events or facts it reports are current or not. Okay, for the example, when a newspaper published in a city celebrating the 100th anniversary of its founding treats material on the centenary, uh, the newspaper will publish a special edition. In the first section, the paper will contain where the parade will pass, what the speaker said at last night's rally, the contents of the congratulatory message sent by governor. That's for the first section. And then the second section, the paper runs historical articles, stories of the city's founding, its pioneers, its early days, and story about the future of the city. That is for timelines. And then about the seasonableness. Seasonable stories are those which could be used appropriately at the same time of any years. For example, a news story about the increase in toy production in the United States is appropriate to be to the average reader's interest if it is published during the Christmas season. Or the example, a story in early February reporting a forgotten set of Abraham Lincoln's letters has just been discovered will be important news with a recent time element as well as story made more interesting by its seasonableness. And then originality. Uh, the news can be say original when the news published at the first time or its first telling. It had originality, warmth, intrinsic worth as entertainment. But when newsmen keep repeating it because they think if it was good yesterday, it's good. Yes, it's good today. That's wrong because the story will lose all freshness and become progressively more hackneyed and banal, or it it is boring. And then the responsibility for news decision. So here is the person who has responsibility for the news decision. They are reporter, editor, and director. Okay, maybe the first is editor. The city editor of the newspaper, the man whose job it is to see that the newsworthy events of the paper's own community are covered. Sometimes he is one of the other news executives, and then the director of the radio or television newsroom, the editor of the news magazine, the planner of the news reel. He may be a then reporter, even a very young reporter just starting in news work. If his news judgment is likely to be subjected to review by more experienced heads, and they are qualifies to be the person who has the responsibility. So, what qualifies the news worker to make the decision? He should be gifted with the intelligence and perception and endowed with special characteristic traits that give him a keen sense of a curiosity. He usually has specialized news training and education and long years of experience. Okay, I think that's all from us. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.